Hello and welcome to dBASE, the base for all things data. Today I'm really excited to talk about an update to a product that we've had out for about a year. And that product is called dbDOS Pro 2. We've done a lot of improvements on it, we've done a lot of work on it, and we've added some really key features that's going to help people get their job done better when using dbDOS Pro 2. So what I wanted to do was a beginning to end of using dbDOS Pro 2 and show you it in action so you can see what we think is a pretty exciting update to the product. So the first thing we want to do when we start off our application is we want to install the dbDOS Pro 2 product. So if I double click on our executable up here, the first thing you're going to see is the user account access if you're on Vista and above operating systems. We'll go ahead and say yes. You'll notice that the dbDOS Pro 2 installer comes up and it basically says welcome, and then the first option you have is to hit next. We can then go through the license agreement and hit next. It then tells you where it's going to install dbDOS Pro 2, which if you have an existing dbDOS installation, it's going to overwrite that. However, if you don't have dbDOS on your system, it's going to go ahead and load it into the program files under the x86 if you're on Windows Vista and above. We've tried to remove as many of the options as possible to make it as easy for the multitudes of people to use the product and make it so that they can get up to speed as quickly and as easily as possible. Once you hit the next button, you go ahead and you hit the install. Once the installer is complete, it's going to come up and say the setup wizard is complete. Do you wish to run the dbDOS configuration now? And I would recommend to you that you do run the configuration now, because that's going to make it the easiest for licensing and registering the new dbDOS Pro 2. So go ahead and say finished. And when you do that, what it should do is it should come up and say that you're ready to go through the activate your dbDOS Pro 2 license. Now, this will come up on any machine that you install this on, and you have a number of them that you can install it on, but it is a per named user license, which means that as long as you're not using the program at the same time on two different machines at the same time, you're good. But we do have registration software in there now that we can monitor to make sure that people are using it correctly. I'm not going to go through the registration part of it, because if I go through the registration part, I don't want to have to highlight and get rid of all of the key information and things like that. So from here, you would normally go through the registration process, but I'm going to go ahead and exit, and just know that that would register your software. Once you're done with that, you can go in and you can kick off the dbDOS configuration manager. And you can do this by hitting the start menu, going to dbDOS and clicking on the configuration manager. And this is the new screen that's going to come up and greet you. We've done a lot of updates to this to make it a little bit easier for people to use it and to get up and running quickly. And I'm going to walk through those steps with you. But the idea is that you have a pretty simple layout here. Let's go over it. You have a new configuration. If you're going to build a new configuration, great. If you want to import a configuration, excellent. Or if you want to watch a video which is going to explain to you how to do what I'm going to show you how to do, you can also do that. We also have a hidden feature up here on the system menu, which is about dbDOS, and it'll just give you a little bit of information about what's going on with dbDOS. Now notice inside of here, as I hit on each one of the buttons and they pop up, you'll notice down at the bottom here in the status bar, you'll notice that it says import existing configuration. We no longer have the flyby help, as many people complained that the flyby help was intrusive. So we've kind of put it out of the way to make it so it's easy for people to know where it's at and they can see what's going on. Now, also on the down on the bottom status bars, we also have the number of configurations. Most people don't have 24 configurations. However, since I have a lot of different things that I do with it, I have a lot of configurations. And this interface makes it very easy for me to manage those configurations. The first thing you want to do after you've come in and installed dbDOS Pro 2 is probably either create a configuration or run a configuration. Now, what's really great about dbDOS Pro 2 is the fact that we have an automatic update system that if you have a configuration out there, it will automatically update your configuration to the latest and greatest. So you don't have to do any manipulation. All you have to do is start it up and it'll take over and it'll continue on. So if I wanted to do an inventory test here, I can just click the Run button. You'll notice the pop-up window comes up, and here in a few seconds, the application itself will come up inside of our application. Now, I can go ahead and close that down. So that has automatically updated that configuration to be dbDOS Pro 2 compliant. Now, for most people, though, they come in the first time, they want to create a new configuration. How do you do that? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Come in and click on the new configuration. The first thing it's going to ask you is what's the name of the configuration. And for this one, I'm going to say dbDOS Pro 2, and underneath of it, I'm going to basically say example configuration. And as you can see, I type it in, and then I'm ready to go to the next process. Now, let me go over what you're looking at right here. You have a couple of things. So down at the bottom, you have the Advanced button, and that will take you to the Advanced Wizard, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. You have a Help button, which will show you a video of how to use the wizard, and then you have a Next button and Cancel button. So let's go through the process. Once I go ahead and hit the Next button, I'm in the wizard format. Now again, notice again over here that you have the Advanced button. At any time you can go into the Advanced Wizard, or you can stay in the Step-by-Step Wizard. Either way, whichever you feel more comfortable with. But what we want to do is we want to create a mounted drive. Now for those people who may not understand this, wherever you put your dBASE application, your programs, and your data, you basically have to tell dbDOS Pro 2 where those things are at. To do that, you create a mounted drive. So notice here, I've got Create Mounted Drive button that I can click. When I click on that, it's going to come up and ask me, where is my physical path? Notice I have a little folder over here, and if I click on that, it's going to bring up a Browse for Folder dialog. If I open up the computer, open up my C prompt, and I go to dBASE, and I click OK, it's going to go ahead and put that in the physical path. It's also going to say the mounted drive is C:, which means that when I sit at my C:, I'm really going to be sitting at C:\dBASE. So if I hit the OK button, you'll notice that dBASE is set up and ready to go. From there, notice down below that we have a dbDOS C:\. And what that represents is that says that this configuration is going to take me to a C prompt, or it's going to take me to a prompt. Now, I can add programs into here, and I'll show you how to do that next, but I'm going to leave it as just a standard C prompt configuration at this particular moment in time. Now remember, everything that's in C:\dBASE will be inside of my C prompt. Okay? So let's go ahead and hit the Next button. From here, it's going to ask you where your code page is. Now, for most people, you don't have to do anything with this. It's auto magic. We basically go in there, we figure out what your machine is set to, if it's set to English, if it's set to American, if it's set to Spanish, whatever it may be set to, and we go out and find it, and we set it. So for most people, you don't have to worry about this. But if you need to set your code page, as you can see, you can come in and set your code page. You can also set the type of keyboard you're using, and also the layout of the keyboard. Again, for most people, you don't have to worry about that. So you can just hit the Next button. Now we get into the printing configuration, and this is something that has always had people wondering how to get it set up the best. And the problem is, of course, is that we're trying to mimic printouts from over 30 years ago, in some cases with the dBASE 3 Plus or dBASE 4 or dBASE 5 for DOS. So when we're looking at this, the best option to take is raw printing. What this means is we're going to send the printer codes right to the printer, and if the printer can understand them, it will print it out. Now, sometimes you have a printer and you have a print driver that doesn't agree with each other, and the printouts won't work. If that's the case, then we give you the ability to do what's called interpretive printing. When we set it to interpretive printing, what that means is that this allows us to go out there and set up the printer so that we can see what the print's going to be looking like. We can set the fonts. We can do a couple of things to it to make it fit the way we want it to. But the idea is that we give you both styles, and sometimes you may have to come in and select one or the other depending on the report. Now again, dbDOS does not make you change your print layouts or your reports or anything like that, as long as the printers and the drivers and everything works together. However, if you have one of those configurations where your printer doesn't agree with dbDOS or the dBASE product or the dBASE printers, and the printer language can't understand the escape codes being sent, that's going to be an issue. So what I'd recommend is always to go, at least start out with the raw print, which puts it right to the printer. The default printer options, if you are setting up with the interpretive print, you can basically set up a default printer and it'll just automatically print to that printer every single time regardless. The way I have it set up right now is that we don't have a default printer, so every time I print, it's going to come up and show me something. The last thing that we have on the printer options and settings is the general print options, which is a timeout. Now this is a 5-second timeout, and most people notice this when they print a report and they notice that the machine kind of locks for a couple of seconds. It's going to actually lock for 5 seconds. And what we're trying to make sure of is that all the print buffers are clear and have been printed out before we continue. That number can be maximized or lowered if you desire and if there's no problems with it. What we have found is the default of 5,000 is a very reliable number. So once you've decided on what print options you want for your dbDOS Pro 2, then it's ready to hit the next button. Once you come into the display options are fairly straightforward. We set it as default to basic rendering. This means that on 99.9% of the machines out there, it will display a DOS window. However, it's not the fastest and it's not the best, but it is the most available to the most hardware out there. So it has the ability to work on most hardware. However, I would recommend that if you have a new machine where you're using Windows 7 or Windows 8, that you can go and use OpenGL. If you use the OpenGL structure, your paint of your screens is going to be faster. You're going to have a little bit better experience with it. But what it also means is that you can set the size of your screen that you want. So right now, I'm going to leave this as original for right now because we're going to come back and mess with this in a little bit. But the idea is when you get to OpenGL, you can start setting your resolutions for your screen. Now the thing is that we also have a start and full screen mode. But let me just explain. In full screen mode, it's going to look just like it does in DOS, but when you go to print something, that's when this Windows get mixed up and doesn't know how to handle. When you're in full screen mode, it thinks it owns everything. When you're not in full screen mode, it basically understands that, oh, there could be a window popping up, or there could be a print window or a print dialog. So my recommendation is not to use the full screen mode, but to actually set it up to OpenGL and then pick a screen size that best fits your screen. And as you can see here, I'll put this in here, you can see we have a whole list of different options for resolutions on your screen. Now, just so you know, we actually read your graphics card and only display options that are available to your video card. So we're not going to show you something that you can't do. But we'll leave this as original right now. I'm going to put it on OpenGL for rendering. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the next button. Now this part here is, do you want to put it in the start menu and do you want to do a desktop? I want to do a desktop shortcut and I'm going to say next. Now if I wanted to test this configuration at any time, I could come up here, click the test button, and we would test that configuration. When I say finished, you'll notice that up at the top I got a brand new dbDOS Pro 2 icon. So if I come in here and double click on it, you'll see the splash screen come up, and here in a second you'll notice that we have a prompt. If I come in here and do a dir/w, you'll notice there's a lot of files in there. If I do a dir.exe, it'll show me all the executables in there. If I do a dir asterisk period, it'll show me all the directories. So I'm just like I was back in the old days doing DOS. So if I want to, I could type in dBASE here, and when I hit enter, it's going to come up with dBASE here in a second. If I didn't want to be in dBASE Classic, I can go ahead and exit. And I know that there is the samples directory in here, so I could go cd samples, just like you normally would, and I could type in area code.exe, and I could run the application that's automatically set up. So I can run it and have it behave just like I normally would. Now, let's go ahead and exit out of this. So I'm just going to type in the word exit. You'll notice it disappears. Now, I want to go back into the dbDOS Pro 2 example configuration, and I want to make a couple of modifications to it. Now, again, remember when I run this, it comes up. You'll notice that the screen, when it comes up, is kind of small. I'm going to want that to be just a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of there. That's one thing, and I also wanted to start up a program. I wanted to start up dBASE for me. So those are two things that I want to do. So if I come in and click the cog, I can go into my configuration again, and notice there's my dbDOS, and I can hit next, 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 and first thing I want to do is make it a bigger screen. So I come into my resolution, and I think I want to go something like 1280 by 720. Let's try that. And I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to hit finish. Now, when I double click on my dbDOS Pro 2, it's going to come up with a much bigger screen than it did before. Now, I'm doing this in a 1000 by 24 by 768, but if I type in the word dBASE here, you'll notice that now my screen is a full, much larger screen than what it was before. So if I exit out of here and then exit, I think I want to make that just a little bit smaller. So I could come back in, click on the cog again, come into here, and we go back into the resolution, and I think I'm going to go 1024 by 768. And we'll sit next, and we'll go ahead and hit finish. Now, I could be using the test configuration just to try it, and then I could go back and forth. But I think I want to just go with 1024 by 768. As you can see, I've got it there, and if I type in dBASE, you'll notice here in a second that it'll come up, and I've got a fairly nice structure from that standpoint. The next thing I want to do, now that I've got the size right, the next thing I want to do is have it pull up that dBASE automatically. So if I go out here to dbDOS Pro 2, and I click the cog, I'm going to go to the next, and this time, instead of going by the mounted drive and automatically launching my program like I did before, I'm going to click on the little house icon down here. When I click on that, it's going to come up and ask me what I want to run. And I can come in here and I can say I want to run dbase.exe. I click on that. Now notice what happened. When I clicked on that exe, my icon changed from the C prompt to the exe. So I can now go next, 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 and then I can say finished, and notice that my icon up here at the top changed from that C:\/ to an exe. Now if I double click up here, it's going to kick this off. It's going to have the wider screen that we set up, and it's also going to kick off into dBASE automatically. So I can start doing whatever I'd like to do from that standpoint. So let's go ahead and exit from there, and I'm going to exit from here. Now, there's one thing that I might want to do just because I'm doing an executable. Let's go back into the cog, and let's go to the last option. So I want to go right here, and I want to automatically exit dbDOS when I close the application. So if I click on that, hit next, and hit finished, now when I double click on this, it's going to bring up dBASE just like it did before. And the next thing I'm going to want it to do is I'm going to want it to exit out of the dBASE application. So I can come in here, say File, Exit, and now notice it automatically closes the window for me, and I don't have to do any extra work. Now, that's great, wonderful, everything looks great there. Now, let's go in there into that cog one more time. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can go to the advanced. And I just want to show you the advanced. I'm not expecting many people to use the advanced. It really is for support because we can do things a lot quicker. We don't have to go through as many steps. But the advanced wizard is exactly like the step-by-step wizard, it's just on one page. So if I come in here and I get rid of the c:\dbase.exe, you'll notice that we go back to a prompt again. You'll notice that I can come down in here, I can slide my scroll bar to the side, I can set my printer options, I can also set additional options that I may want to run inside of here, and I might also want to turn on a status window. I've got additional options that I don't normally get out in the step-by-step one, and most, like I said before, most of those are made for support of the dbDOS Pro product. So when I hit save, you'll notice that now we're back to a C prompt. So the way that we do this is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty easy to go back and forth. Now, a couple of things that I thought that I'd like to show you inside of here that I think are really cool new features. A couple of things. One of the things that you may want to get yourself familiar with is some of the new features of dbDOS Pro 2. And what that is these special options. So notice when I click on the system menu up here, if I click on that, I have an about box. If I do that, it'll show me the about box. If I come into here and if I want to take a screen print of my screen, okay, I can take a screen print of my screen. There, notice it shows C prompt, and I can go ahead and print that. I can put it into my clipboard and use it into another program, or I can save it out as something else. So I have the ability to print out a screen at any time, and that'll print out the full screen. So if I was in dbDOS here and I said dBASE and I hit enter, you'll notice that here in a second I'm going to come out here and say give me a print screen and minus this, and you'll notice there's my print screen with the mouse on it and everything. Again, I can save it, I can put it to the clipboard, I can print it, or I can just close it out and it'll get rid of it. So one of the features that I really want to highlight to you is the ability for us to copy from Windows into dBASE. And so I'm going to come up with a contrived example that shows how easy it is to do this. But let's do this. I'm going to have Notepad up here, and let's just say I put a question mark, date, open close parentheses, and that's it. I'm going to come into my Notepad and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to do a Control-C to copy that. I'm then going to come back into dBASE using dbDOS Pro 2, and I want to paste that in to my current area. So if you notice, I have a paste from Windows. If I click in paste from Windows, you notice the question mark comes in and the date, and if I hit enter, you'll notice that I have 8/20/13 up here. So that shows you how you can take stuff from Windows and bring it into dbDOS Pro 2's environment. Now, what happens if I wanted to print something out the other way? What if I wanted to take something and put it into a ability for me to copy it out into Windows? That's something that we haven't been able to do, and it's an exclusive new feature of dbDOS Pro 2. So let's do this. Let's go in here and say File, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my directory, and we're going to come in to do a samples. And we'll do samples and we'll say OK. The next thing I want to do is I want to open up one of the databases in here. So I'm going to go in here to codes and I want to open up codes. Now notice I have my codes database in here. Now this new feature that we've added allows me to copy from dbDOS environment out to Windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into here and I'm going to say click on my system menu and I'm going to say print to dbDOS clipboard, and I'm going to hit the button. Now notice when I did that, I've got a little check mark inside of here that says I'm printing to the clipboard. Now if I come into here and I say set printer on and I do a list, notice what happens. In the background you notice that you get all of your Chicago, Washington, LA, all of that. And if I minimize this, you notice that I have a copied selection to the clipboard. So now I can come in, highlight these, do a Control-C, and then I can come out to my Notepad and I can do a Control-V, and there's all my data coming from dbDOS out. Now here's another really cool feature that we've added to this. We've also added the ability to copy the whole thing into the clipboard, or if you're inside of here and you just want to print it from here, you can go ahead and print the report from here. So not only have we given you the ability to print it, we've also given you the ability to copy it. So it's a great feature that if you want to do something and copy it into something else in your Windows environment, it's now really, really easy to do. So again, close this. Let's go back in here to dbDOS. If I do a list, now again, I'm going out to the printer. So I'm sending it out to the printer, and then I minimize this down. There's my list again, and now I can take these last guys, come into here, put this into here, and do it again. So it's a really quick and simple way of being able to copy from dbDOS environment to the Windows environment. So then once you're done with that, a couple of things that we have left. You can export a configuration. Just come into here, click on this little button, and it'll come up and say, hey, I'm going to export this out. You can go into the notepad view of this, but usually this is done with us. This is done from somebody with dBASE, and we're telling you exactly what to do. There's really no reason to go into that. You can get to everything with your configuration manager. You don't need to go into the file. And then the last thing you can do is you can delete it. So you come out here, click the red X button, delete it, and it's off the list. So from there, I think we have covered the complete from the beginning install to the install through the entire running of the application, and showing you some of the new capabilities and features. And don't forget, dbDOS Pro 2 is 100% faster than dbDOS 1.51. And that's because we have a new memory manager inside of there, so it's a really, really great functionality. So again, thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed dbDOS Pro 2. Have a great day. Bye-bye.